I'm going to be talking about 10 lessons learned, specifically 10 lessons learned since July 1st, 2011. Why July 1st, 2011? Well, that's actually when we launched Intercom way back. What basically, probably I remember the day very clearly. I was running from client meeting to client meeting, and in the middle of the day I refreshed Twitter, and it's like 100,000 people I felt like were tweeting about Intercom, and I was like, how the fuck did they find out about Intercom? And it turns out Jason Frieda tweeted about it, which was basically, fantastic on the day, and then obviously queued up a shitload of support requests. So this is a sort of lessons learned talk. Today, Intercom's 240 people, over 8,000 customers, significant double-digit revenue growth month to month. Things have gone really well. We are, as was said, at 2 offices, Dublin and San Francisco. And I'm kind of approaching this from what do I know now that I did not know then. So some of this is lessons learned the hard way. Some of it's things that, hey, shit, we tried it and it actually worked. And hopefully you can tell the difference. So it's kind of hard to cast my mind all the way back to things that mattered versus things we pissed away a lot of time on that didn't actually matter in the end. But I'll do my best to try and dissolve them. The first thing, and this is probably like the most fluffy, abstract, but in my opinion, genuinely the most important point, is this idea of vision. When we started Intercom, we had a very clear idea of the problem we were trying to solve. For those of you who are into the history of SaaS, you might remember a product called Exceptional. That was our original product. And with Exceptional, we had like thousands of users. We could, as a funny side note, I often tell people, there was a street in San Francisco where we had more customers than we did in all of Ireland, which maybe told us we should consider a different office. But we had this problem where we had all these customers and we had no way whatsoever to know who the hell they were, and talking to them was a nightmare. That if you can remember back in the days before Stripe and good tools like that, the way we actually talked to our customers was we'd go into PayPal, export a CSV, sync that up with like some sort of analytics which would tell us who's actually using the product, not just who's paying for it, and then import it all into like MailChimp or Campaign Monitor and send out a mail, and then you get like 150 replies into your personal Gmail, and you try to sort through all that, and it was a fucking nightmare. So hence we settled on this Intercom idea. So why does vision matter? I think without a vision, the companies I worry about when they don't have vision is that they tend to flip-flop and they don't have a good sort of base set of axioms or calculus that lets them make quick decisions. It kind of reminds me of the Cheshire Cat scene in Alice in Wonderland, where Alice comes to a fork in the road and the Cheshire Cat's there, and she says, well, where should I go, left or right? And he says, well, where are you trying to go? And she's like, I don't know. And he says, well, then does it fucking matter which way you go? Unless you have a vision, you don't necessarily know what it is you're trying to do. And as a result, every single decision will paralyze you because you don't have any sort of guiding light. And to bring this to practical terms, when I talk about a vision, I consider it to have like 3 sort of core components. Firstly, it's like an opinion about what the future looks like. And that's, this is important, but it's like you have to look at all the technological trends that are happening at the same time, not just the things you're going to do, but what else is going on. And then the sort of the new tech that you're going to bet on, or the new assumptions you're going to bet on. So if you're going to build a business based on Intercom or based on Stripe or based on something like that, are you confident that you're going to bet on them for the next 5, 10, 15 years or whatever? And then lastly, an idea of the change that you actually want to make. So like, given that all this stuff is going to happen, all these technological trends are solid, the world's moving a certain way, what do you want to do to change it? And it can be different if you're in commerce, or if you're a messaging app, or if you're marketing, or if you're churn or customer success or whatever. There's always a set of things that you should think about in the future. So if you take a random one like marketing, marketing is getting more personal and personalized. It's now more important than ever that marketing can prove its value. It's now more important than ever that marketing is metrics driven. And we're seeing a shift towards people who are advertising to start engagement rather than conversion. So you're seeing a lot of brand advertisement on the internet, which we didn't see before. And like all of these trends are important for you to understand, for you to even begin to tackle your world. And your world might be invoicing, or might be project management, or might be time tracking. But even at that, these things are changing as well. Slack is fundamentally changing the nature of project management. Remote work is changing the nature of like time tracking and all these sort of things. Like, you need to think about these implications as they move forward. In Intercom, our VP of product, Paul Adams, he refers to this frequently as like his 666 roadmap, which is it's not as evil as it sounds. He says like your first 6 weeks should be pretty well planned and like task driven, and your 6 months should be significant bodies of work, and in 6 years should be a very strong opinion about what the world will look like in 6 years' time. And it's important to have all three so that you can basically know where you want to get to, know how to chunk it in bodies of work, and then also know what to do today. So when we talk about tech trends, it's interesting because there are genuinely, the world of technology is one where we just throw everything out and reinvent it every few years. What trends actually matter to your business? Like this product, you could call it a flop, or you could call it a multi-billion-dollar flop, whatever way you want to refer to it. Is that something that actually matters in your world? If you're is this relevant? Is the connected home relevant, right? This idea that Porsches and toasters form a category called the Intercom of things. Or is wearables, do any of these things actually matter in your world? And if they don't, that's fine, but that's your opinion. And you might think, yeah, well, Des, I'm working on a finance app, it's just a piece of SaaS, it's web only. That's cool, but just bear in mind that these other trends are happening. And if it turns out that they do matter, that's going to be a big problem for you if you've chosen to ignore them. The biggest trend that actually does impact the majority of the businesses here, from what little homework I did, is this idea of the decreased cost to do anything online. So whether it's to compute, to store, or to access anything whatsoever, it's become cheaper now than ever, as is always the case in tech, to set up anything. So you can have a case where you have 4 people running a multi-million, or occasionally tens of million-dollar business. And that's because of trends like this. And what that kind of gets us is this explosion of software. For example, you've got every single app here is a messaging app. They all think they're reinventing the world of messaging, and I'm not even joking. Someone took the painstaking time of color coding their entire home screen, and I appreciate it. I just copied that image. Wasn't my job. But genuinely, some of these will go on to become $18 billion businesses like WhatsApp. Some of them will become niche players for specific uses. But the one thing I always say when I see this, 3 years ago, I used to talk about photo apps being the new thing. Post-Instagram, photo apps was what everyone flocked to straight away. And the one thing they always seem to be lacking is a sense of what change is, what are they actually doing? Are they just copycatting something that they saw work? For example, are they just looking and saying, Josh got to 50K MRR by doing metrics on Stripe. I'm going to do metrics on Stripe and get to 55K MRR. It doesn't necessarily work that way. You have to have a sort of a bigger idea about what you're doing. That bigger idea, to me, is best captured as why do you exist other than to make money? And making money is obviously important. It's what we're all here for, in a sense, right? Well, not here, obviously. If you want to make money, we'll be back at work. But what is it you're actually shooting for? And the reason I think this matters is because if you stick with goals or targets, or if you go for I want to be the number 1 or the top 10 or whatever, the danger is one day you'll wake up and you'll hit that target, and then you don't know what the fuck you want to do. And genuinely, that will happen. For sure, every metric or goal I thought Intercom could never hit, we've hit. And I've got lots more that we haven't hit yet, but optimistic we'll hit them too. But if your goal is 50K MRR and that's all you're thinking about, what do you do the day that happens, right? And I know that sounds like a first world problem in a sense, but it really comes down to what it is you're actually shooting for. So I think it's really, it can be quite an inspiring thing for you, your teammates, your company, if you intend to grow one, to actually have a sense of the bigger picture. And for us, it's we want to make internet business personal. Stripe want to increase the GDP of the internet. And when you look at projects like Atlas that they recently did, you can see that actually is their guiding light. Instacart want to be the best way for anyone to get food or pay people to go to the store for you. Uber want transportation as reliable as running water. But the key point is, I do genuinely think it'll help you with your content marketing. It will help you speak about your product. It will help you recruit if you want to recruit. It'll help you inspire your customers if you actually tell them this bigger picture of what it is you're shooting for. If you come straight out in your blog and say, my entire goal is to hit 20K MRR or whatever, that's cool, but just don't expect that to resonate with anyone other than you and your bank balance. And that is a risk. So there's a lot of value in having a larger picture. When you have that larger picture, it's obviously imperative to start small. One of my favorite laws from systems engineering is something called Gall's Law. And Gall's Law simply states that any complicated system that works has evolved from a simple system that works. Any complex system designed from scratch will fail. What that's saying is that even if you wanted to build a bloated piece of shit, you have to start small. Even if you want to end up in this big sort of monolithic mess, you got to start small. If you start big, you're broken from day one. And it's interesting, when you look at even the biggest, bloatiest things we could imagine, they've all started small. So if we look at Salesforce today have a couple of products, you might say. They've a reasonably large suite. But when you look at where Salesforce started, it's pretty funny. This is Salesforce when they launched. And those of you with really good eyesight will notice that they're giving away a Zig Ziglar tape to anyone who signs up for a trial. And the fact that it's a cassette tape actually tells you how long ago that was. Because DVDs were probably expensive. That was probably for premium trials. Or no, it wouldn't have been invented yet, actually. They did start small, though. Word today is like most people's poster boy for being like the big bloaty piece of software. Now, I always remind people, check yourself before you criticize Word. I think it's the second most successful software product of all time ever. So they could do a few less tabs, but like really, But if you look at Word where it started, this is like Word literally way back. This is the earliest screenshot I could find, and it looks a lot more like Notepad. But they got there, right? So I really believe like starting small with a simple thing is incredibly important. That's hardly a new message to you, but maybe the way we'll go through this will actually be interesting. It's really hard to solve, especially in a small team where you can't afford external research or anything like that. It's really hard to solve a problem you innately have yet to experience yourself. So if you've never run a business, building software for people who run a business is really hard because you don't have the domain expertise. If you've never acquired customers, building software that helps people acquire customers is really hard because you literally you're totally blind to the problem. So as a result, your solution is not going to be well defined to pair with it. You know it well when you can understand a problem so intimately that you can distill it into specific workflows and you can build features that enable those workflows to happen. Your first release in this regard should be the smallest piece of software that solves the problem. And at that point, you should stop and genuinely put your text editor away when you think you've solved the problem. The reason I say this is because if that fails, either the problem isn't real, right, as in it might have been something that frustrated you, but it's not generalizable, so you haven't nailed it in that regard. You don't understand it. So you're tackling a real problem, but your understanding of it isn't there. You literally thought you had a working solution and no one cares. Or your execution of it sucked. So you didn't actually, turns out there's you offered a low quality offering that no one stuck around for. And obviously there's a fourth category here, which is you forgot to tell the world that you launched or whatever. But generally distribution into 50 to 100 signups is like relatively easy to get these days with sites like Product Hunt, with things like Twitter, even with the network in this room, you could definitely find 20 to 50 people. If none of them can stick around and keep using it after a couple of weeks, you should really stop there. And the danger is you'll try and feature your way out of this. Because especially if you're a technical founder, that's your go-to move for everything. There's no problem that Emacs can't solve, right? Or VI or whatever. It's the most tempting thing. It's much harder to think, well, maybe I need to do my homework a bit better. Just a side note, a product we almost launched way back was, this is pre-Intercom. We were kind of on a knife edge of will we build Intercom or will we build this? Now, it was, you'll laugh when I see it, it was, have you ever taken a photo of a whiteboard? Yes, you probably have, right? I'm hoping. Maybe you haven't. Maybe that's what the fucking problem was. So we built this whiteboarder tool, and we called it Whiteboarder, and it was an iPhone app plus a web app that basically every single time you took a photo, it would automatically go and be shared with your teammates of any whiteboard you ever did. And we thought it would work, and we ended up getting into this sort of what I call execution death spiral. So that death spiral looks something like this, and I'm sure you've seen this before, but no one was using our product, so we said, well, what features will make you use our product? And people are trying to be helpful, so they give us lots of suggestions as features. We go and build those features, and our payback for building those features is, of course, that no one uses our product. And you can genuinely piss away a good few months of your life chasing this, and it's not fun, right? because users aren't, like, it's very, very hard for customers, especially people who, like, if they are within your network, it's even harder for them to give you a very honest answer of, hey, that problem, the iPhone camera is good enough. And you're like, huh? You know, it can, you know, they really feel like they're hurting you. So you have to be careful who you ask for feedback, which brings us to our next point, which is that you have to manage your beta deliberately. Beta periods are hard, and like there's a whole art to it that most people just blitz through, totally ignoring that like there's a lot going on here and they're making a lot of decisions. They kind of think, who else run betas? Okay, so the deal is, how do you run a beta? You put a shit sign-up page live, you make some sort of vague offering, you collect a load of email addresses, go build a product, spam all the email, or not spam, it's targeted direct mail. You email all the people. I mean, it genuinely isn't spam in that case. They've actually asked you. Mail all the people, they all bounce off it, we're done, right? And like that's basically the most depth of thought that actually gets into most betas. There's a few different problems people make along the way. A small list of target users beats a big list that includes a lot of non-customers. You should really be careful about who you let into your beta, because you only want people in there who are actually the people that you think should credibly use your product. And you shouldn't let the notions of, ooh, we could have 100 users by Monday, actually influence that, because you only want you only want feedback from people who are actually credible users. And this is why whenever I see people doing something like, we're going to give away a free Apple Watch to everyone who signs up or whatever, like give away a free Apple Watch and you'll get people who want Apple Watches. They're probably not interested in your invoicing solution, you know? Give away a free iPad and you'll get people who want, now, if you happen to be building something for people who want Apple Watches, that's great. So, for example, if you're making Apple Watch straps or wristbands or whatever, perfect, give away an Apple Watch. They're the exact people you want. But for most of us, we're not doing that. We're building software that targets a specific business need. Another danger you'll fall into, and this comes back to the vision thing a little bit, but if you make a big, vague pitch about your product, what will you get? You'll get a big, wide range of users, right? This product here is basically saying next to nothing about what it does. Has a cool name. I just invented it for this presentation, obviously. But, if you do this, what you'll get is a lot of people who are kind of interested in photography reimagined, whatever the hell that is. And that gets you a lot of feedback. So you'll get feedback like, yeah, well, I want to sell my photos, or I want to export them to Intercom, or I want better filters, or I need to collaborate with my art director. And you're going to have these sorts of feedback all over the place, right? Those 4 people are looking for 4 totally different products. And none of them are probably looking for R2, photography reimagined, or whatever the hell it does. But if you keep taking this feedback, and this will feed your sort of feature bias of like, yeah, well, we're just a few features away from being ready. You're going to go and build this beautiful mess. Like you'll build this wide variety of features, and you're going to end up with like all this shit that basically has sprawled. And each of these ones here maybe has like 5 users who actually care about it. But that's like, you know, specifically when you're in the world of like, let's start with a small team and let's hit revenue quickly, this is the worst way to go about it. Another danger relating to this is just, you'll always feel one feature away. You will always feel one feature away from going live. And don't rely on your customers to tell you when to launch. Your customers are never going to be like, hey, listen, I'd love to end my free beta period, and I'd love you to start charging me now. Very rarely you get those emails. So like, you know, sitting back waiting for your customers to tell me, I think you've got the product perfect, they just won't, right? Occasionally, like some of the more conscientious entrepreneurial users will be like, hey, heads up, this is actually really good or whatever. But for the most part, you're never going to get this email. And you'll never feel ready. And I really like this quote by Rands where he says, like, iterating means like, you know, keep going until it's great, not just keep going because you don't have a good definition of what done looks like. And that's the danger. There's an iteration cycle, you know, it's compounded by the fear of actually going live and testing the reality of your hypothesis that makes it real scary. This is why I like people who can, like, you know, there's only really 2 ways to exit a beta, in my opinion. You can exit by scope, as in you're going to say, we're going to address all these features and we're done. Or you can exit by time, as in November 1st, it's going. Hell or high water, that's happening, right? And the best ways to think about this come from people like Steve Jobs or whatever, who will say, like this, I love this definition of the DVD burning product in OS X, where he said, basically, here's the app, it's got one window, you drag your window, you click the button, it says burn, that's it. And it was a very, very simple definition of what otherwise would have been a monstrosity of a product. And his advice was, it has one feature, it burns DVDs. Next problem, please. And when you get that sort of clarity, that's when you know your product is ready. If anyone's a Saturday Night Live fan here, one of my favorite quotes ever is, it was in Tina Fey's book, Bossy Pants, when she was explaining to Lauren, she was like, well, look, I've been working on this scene for a while, it's just not quite ready. And he said, ready? The show doesn't go on because it's ready, it goes on because it's 11:30 on Saturday night. Which is a solid point. Like, you don't get to fuck around. It's like 11:30, the viewers tune in, whatever you got is whatever it's gonna go. And I really believe that you can exit by feature set or you can exit by deadline, but above all, you got to exit. One reason that really matters to me is that beta periods are really lossy, and people don't realize the cost of being in beta. And we certainly, like when we had our beta period in Intercom, like, you name it, like Airbnb, Dropbox, TaskRabbit, they all signed up. And then it took us like 7 months to get out and be like, oh, hey, we launched a product. At that point, half the people we emailed had like left the company and stuff. Like, we lost so much. People don't realize you would never design a sign-up flow that looks like this, right? Visit a website, confirm your email, wait a few months, get an invite. You could not imagine a higher attrition flow for getting people to use your product. Done. Let's make them confirm their email for something that they don't yet know what it is, and then let's wait a few months, and then let's mail them again and try to re-explain ourselves. It's not a great period to be in, so be careful. The attrition is just high, and most frequently what we see is and I'm sure we all get this. We've all gotten some mail where it's like, welcome, your trial of SnapCycle is now ready, and you're like, what the fuck is SnapCycle? And you don't realize you signed up for it 7 months ago and you saw a beta page on Product Hunt or something like that, right? And now they're like, yeah, we're ready. Are you ready? And we're like, ready for what? So that's the danger. And sort of a connected point is during these beta periods, I genuinely think you're better off staying relatively quiet about your product. It's kind of easy to let your mouse and kind of in conjunction, your ego, run away with it as you start telling people I've solved all the world's problems, wait until you check out my software. The danger here is first impressions do count. If you ever intend to get coverage, and by coverage I say press here, it's just as true for Product Hunt or Hacker News or anywhere you actually want to share it, growthhackers.com, whatever. You'll only get really one stab at that. And lastly, the less you say, more people listen. So if you're forever talking up this product, people eventually tune it out and they're like, dude, mail me when it's done. So let's say we get through all that and people actually do start signing up. I genuinely believe, and we have an entire team in Intercom that works on this specific problem, onboarding. It's literally the most important thing you can get right after your product is letting people get to experience the magic of your product. And the most common phrase we use, and I've already heard it twice at this conference, is we're in this dog fooding period. And I believe it. You're probably dog fooding your software, but there's a difference between dog fooding your product as you think it's going to be used and dog fooding sign up. So the one thing I often say when people they are forever sharing all these beautiful screens of what their product actually might do one day, signing up for your app is the only thing that everyone's guaranteed to do. It's literally the only flow that you can guarantee everyone will go through, right? It's the highest leverage thing you can work on in that regard because everyone will go through it. And yet most product owners sign up for their app once. And when they did it, it looked like this, right? The risks here are your tour, as you build out your features and as you complete your idea of the product and what it can do, whatever tour you've worked on for people who land in your product, it will go out of date because you're pitching features that are no longer important and that you've worked on more important shit since then that you're no longer talking about in your onboarding. Your docs will go out of date. Your welcome email is probably out of date. It's probably asking them to take the wrong first step or asking them not to do it the coolest way or the best way to integrate or whatever. Your videos will go out of date. All your marketing material goes out of date. And at Intercom, genuinely probably one of the most significant projects in the history of the company was we looked at sign up finally, and this is why we built a whole team around it. We looked at what was happening when people signed up, and we were trying to work out why is it take a room like this, everyone here signs up for Intercom. Why is it so many of them bounce? And the answer lies a lot in the fact that they're not all necessarily engineers. And the way the sign-up flow we had designed required you to be an engineer. So what people who aren't engineers have typically is credentials for a third-party product like a MailChimp or a Mixpanel or a Stripe or something like that. They also have CSVs of their user list because they tend to email their customers. They tend to be in charge of the other half of the business. We built a CSV importer for Intercom, and it improved our conversion rates by 48%. And that like, you know, to put in perspective, I mean literally, let's say conversion was 2%, it went to like 3% or whatever. That's a huge, huge impact. Compared against people who A/B test green versus red buttons or whatever, like this is huge. And we wouldn't have got that realization if we didn't obsess over what this new experience was like. And there's a whole talk about that on our blog you can have a look at. But the thing I'd really encourage you to think about here is that like real dog fooding means you're actually eating a new tin every day. That's how dogs stay alive, you know? They don't eat one tin once 2 years ago and then, you know, live off sustenance since then. So never stop signing up for your product, genuinely. As I said, we literally have a team that does this every day, every week. All they think about is how can people who hit that email address and click sign up, how can they get as successful as possible? When you're out there, you're going to start looking at the market, and you'll be tempted to like look in like either product categories or look for people who are directly competing with you. So if you do invoicing or time tracking or churn reduction or funnel analysis or metrics, you're going to look for other people doing the exact same thing and think these are my real competitors. That's not always the case, and in fact, in most of my experience has been it's rarely the case that your competitors are exactly there. Your competitors tend to be somewhat more orthogonal. I often ask people, like, when do flowers compete with chocolate, right? One of them is in like the confectionery industry and the other one's in the horticultural industry, right? They're two different categories, but we can all imagine a scenario where we've said we need flowers or chocolate, right? Sometimes you buy both of them together, sometimes they're complementary goods, but they do compete. If you're trying to send a thank you or send a congratulations or send a I'm sorry or whatever, that's when you're literally deciding one or the other. And yet, I doubt anyone in Hershey's is like, we need to get better at beating out these 12 roses. Right? When does Twitter compete with games? You're bored on your commute to work. You know, again, Twitter thinks that, you know, it would be simple for Twitter to think that like their competition's Facebook, but it's not. It's anything that gives a quick hit of interesting information in the space of 3 to 5 minutes. Or what really competes with TripAdvisor, right? Is it like Yelp and Foursquare, or is it like asking a human out in the street, hey, where should I go for a drink around here? These are all like the sort of questions now. Like they're like 3 sort of examples that won't necessarily be like the way you should think about it. The way I would encourage you to think about it is like you have like direct competitors, which are people trying to address the same market with the same type of marketing and the same type of product. There are indirect competitors, and there are like sort of tertiary competitors. Tertiary competitors are tricky because they'll have conflicting offerings. Like, for example, McDonald's compete with gymnasiums, right? They don't realize it, but they do. It's like, you know, it's like if you believe in one of these products, you're unlikely to believe in the other, okay? Or you're just very, very disciplined. But like every single note-taking app I've used has lost its fight, or sorry, not note-taking, really kind of task management. It's lost its fight to me putting Post-its on my monitor. That's literally my #1 way of getting things done. And whenever I quit on like Wunderlist or Todoist or any of the things, and everyone asks me, hey, why didn't it work out? I'm like, you know, it was just always easier to write a Post-it and stick it on my monitor. And you know, we could get into it and we could sort of say, well, what is that? Like it's a direct real-world notification, if you like. It stops me from doing other work until I've got this thing done. I'll never forget it. It's a ferocious competitor. For a lot of the products in this room, email is a ferocious competitor too. I frequently email myself ideas for blog posts. There are whole products that think that I should use their solution for this. And they're probably right, but like it's important to work out what is it that makes email so strong for these things. And in general, like if on some sort of law of averages, I'd say most of you have email as a competitor in some sense, just plain old email. And it's worth thinking about why that is. And when your customers quit, are they definitely going to a competitor, or are they going back to their old habit, which was like, actually, I just email the customer manually, or actually, I just like send myself an email as a reminder, or actually, I just email people instead of Slacking or whatever. So when you have competitors, it's always useful to know what makes people switch. So there is a weird moment in the world where like a customer is going along their daily business one day and they caught some of your marketing, maybe they saw you in product and whatever. And for those of you who've acquired customers, they literally made a subconscious or conscious choice, I'm going to change my world so that I can start paying you money for your software. That moment is best regarded as being some sort of switching moment. Every time a customer adopts your product, they are quitting something else. They're like quitting on a bad habit, or they're quitting on Post-its on their monitor, or they're quitting on email, or they're quitting on not doing something, but they're changing something about their life. And the best way to think about that is this nature of the switching moment. And there's 4 forces that, like, so I don't know if any of you are familiar with the jobs to be done method, but like this is a really interesting way to think about it, what makes somebody switch. There are 4 forces at play. On the left-hand side here, what we have is their current life. Most people don't switch. Most of you who are using MacBooks here, you're not going to switch, right? People don't regularly change products. Your life would be a nightmare if every you have to like go from first principles on every single decision you make. So you just hard code some things. I drink Pete's coffee. I use an iPhone. I use a MacBook, whatever. The forces at play here, the 2 green ones are the forces of progress. The first of these is what is shit about what you're currently doing, right? And the second is what is exciting or attractive about this new offering. And then below the line are the forces of the stagnant forces. These are what keeps the world the way it is. What am I scared about adopting this new product? And then what do I actually like about where I am today? And when you're trying, and it's really worth doing this, like sit down with a pen and paper or a whiteboard and work out what are our competitors, our real competitors? Why do people stick with them? What attracts them to us? What are they scared about from us? And what pushes them away from their current force? From the current solution, sorry. And what you want to do is maximize the top forces. You want to say, yes, your solution's shit. Ours is fucking amazing. You shouldn't be scared of it. And also, all those reasons that you're still using it, they're all irrelevant, right? And the best campaign ever that did this was this one. I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. They were so strong on this idea of PCs have viruses. They're slow. You have to change them every 2 years. You have to reboot them all the time. Macs have no viruses. They are amazing. They are fast. They are beautiful looking. And then like they went at the other side, don't worry, all your office tools, that all works on Macs. You can do spreadsheets on Macs. All the things you like about Windows, that you can have all them too. They addressed every single one with like such a broad media campaign of every angle. And like lo and behold, when they started this campaign, it wasn't true, but like now I'm looking at probably easily 100 Apple logos in front of me here today. One interesting thing to notice is this area, there's this like sort of principle of business called like the 9x effect. Most of you overvalue how good your product is by about 3x, me included. And most customers tend to overvalue what they have by about 3x. So the tables are against you. You think what you have is amazing, and they think that what they have is disproportionately better than it is. So in this case here, if you look at the new is like slightly a better offering than old, but the 9x effect makes it like not relevant, basically. It's what makes it pretty tricky. So this is like, I have a pet belief that, I don't know if you ever read Paul Buchheit's thing about like, 10x is what it takes to really motivate a change. It's like pseudo bullshit calculus, whatever, but I like to think that this is what's going on here. To actually be really better, you need to be so significantly better such that people's resistance to change and your own inflated sense of what you've created are like actually washed out because the product is so much stronger. So people are switching to your product, you're talking to customers, and they're asking you, what are you going to do next? So product roadmaps are interesting and dear to my heart. It's probably something we've talked about and thought about more in Intercom than any other single topic. It's, when you start playing out your roadmap, it's really easy to justify new work, and it's really hard to justify revisiting old work. And the forces at play there are very obvious. New shit's interesting, and there's no legacy code that you have to worry about, right? You get to do whatever the hell you want. The problems here are that you're not thinking about it from your customer's point of view. You're thinking about it from what's a fun thing to code, or what's a fun thing to design, or what's a fun workflow to add. If you have a product, and most of you do, it's really important to be able to do this. I've been talking about this matrix for about 2 years, so I won't go on too long. But there are ways to think about your features that are pretty simple. How often people use it, and how many people use it. And the simplest way to think about this is, if you take something like whatever screen people see in your product right after login, that's something that all of the people use all of the time. So making a small improvement there versus coming up with the world's best reset password flow is like disproportionately different. Reset password is some of the people, some of the time. Post login is all of the people, all of the time. So it's really important you can do this. And when you're thinking about your features and what work you actually want to work on, it's really worth asking yourself, am I working on the most important things for my customers? In the top left here, the hazard signs, this is the area where you end up building small niche features for customers who might even be promising you a big, like, I'll pay $500 a month if you add this one thing. If it's just them, if it's just those customers, you're going to end up building what I call consultingware. That is, you have a solution, but you've basically turned into a freelancer who has like maybe 80 customers, and each one has a different app, and you've just kludged them all together into one. And that's a really dangerous place to be in, especially if you're a small team, because you won't be able to maintain it all. You'll basically suffer death through attrition of like consistently, everyone wants their own features worked on. A good way to think about your roadmap is like you should have 4 types of work in your product. Number 1 is you should be improving the features you already have. And you can measure that through an increase in customer satisfaction. Whether you do that through NPS or qualitative feedback or whatever way you want to do it. Number 2 is you should be getting more people to use features you've already built. Getting people to use features you've already built more. And lastly, and this should be the edge case, not the default case when you come into work, building new features to attract new workflows so you can hopefully grow your customer base or at least grow your revenue. And that's genuinely how I think about it. When you're tackling this, there's a lot of trade-offs with feature work that you have to consider. One of them is like the trade-off between quality, importance, satisfaction, and frequency. And this is especially important when you're actually looking at your existing product. Quality is basically asks, how good is this thing today? Importance is, how important in the user's workflow is it? Is it like a nice to have, or is it like something that's actually core, and if it breaks, the whole product goes to shit? How satisfied are they today? And then how often do they use it? And any 2 or 3 of these can give you an indication of how important something is to work on. If it's an important thing that people use frequently, but they think it's bad, yeah, that's something you want to work on. However, if it's not an important thing, but people are pissed off at it, it doesn't really matter. And like these are all just ways to think about it, right? Another way to think about it is Tony Ulwick's framework. And he has like the importance satisfaction sort of index, right? And what he says is that basically you need to score features by how important they are and score features by how satisfied your customers are. And that tells you where the opportunities to improve are. So this will stop you from working on shit that either isn't important or that you're already nailing pretty well. Both of those things are always tempting, right? Literally the highest leverage thing you have as a founder or as a founding member of a product team is picking what you actually do and what your company works on. If you're not picking it right, or if you're stuck by any sort of naive bias of let's do the new fun shit, you're throwing away the opportunity that you created yourself. So when we talk about getting things used, let's say more or by more people, a target feature might be here, right? Maybe 60% of people use it. Maybe on average they use it like once a week or something like that. And maybe in your world, once a week isn't enough, right? Obviously, you can't get people, if you're invoicing, you can't get people to invoice any more than they need to invoice, right? So there's obviously real-world pressures here as well. But it's good to ask yourself, how can we trigger more usage? And if you're familiar with any of Nir Eyal's work, he has some pretty solid material on how to actually get users into more habitually using your product for key things. And he talks about things like, how can we make it more of a habit? How can we create more triggers? What if it notified Slack every time this happened? Or what if we sent a morning mail that told people, here's the 3 actions you need to complete or whatever? What sort of rewards can we do? How can we make it the default that people do this? How can we make it usable in more context? What if it was easy to do on the phone? What if you could send an SMS and it would do it automatically or whatever? How can it be used for more purposes? These are all good ways to ask, how can we get people using a feature more? And then the other side is, when you want to increase the adoption of a feature, what's stopping people from using it today? And it's easy to say, it's easy to take customers' first answer here, but it's really important to think about it from what the classic sort of, the Japanese method would be like the 5 whys, right? Understanding the real why. So they'll say, I don't need it. And you say, well, why don't you need it? Because you believed that they needed it. That's why you created it. They say, I don't get any value out of it. And you're like, why? Well, it doesn't present well in meetings. Oh, why? Well, I want to send around a doc and present a PowerPoint file, and what you've given me is a screenshot of some stuff. And you're like, oh, right. What's limiting there? And they're like, well, why didn't we build a image or a report or something that could be used here? Oh, well, because the data is like hidden behind all the UI controls or whatever. You're like, okay. So now you have an actual hypothesis, right? This is the deep reason someone's not using this is because the job to be done is help me impress somebody in a meeting by sending around a report. And you're not enabling that because the thing they'd send around is a screenshot full of drop-down menus, which looks shit. So that's one example of getting to the real why, and that's an actual real example from Micro. What you do is you do enough of this and you'll get to root causes for a lot of reasons why things aren't getting adopted by all your users. It's fair to say not everyone needs to use everything you've built, but it's also fair to say that most people should be using most of the things you've built. And if you're not there, you have a problem. So what you do is you get these sort of barriers to adoption, is what I would call them, and you rank them and you resolve them. And something I often say to people is like, it's tempting to believe that like every single one of these things needs more lines of Ruby or Knockout or whatever. That's not always the case. Sometimes you just need better education, or you just need to communicate things better. You need more tooltips, you need slightly simpler UI, whatever. But you can easily communicate, here's how you can do this thing properly or whatever. I'm not saying that you can communicate your way out of everything, but it's a good test before you go and do a lot of programming work to say, well, what if we just told people how to do this? It's a great way to validate your hypothesis of, yes, I need to rewrite this feature or simplify it or whatever. One thing I would say with roadmaps is it's really tempting. Anytime you have a long list, it's really easy to do the classic sort of order list, which is here's a list of work we need to do, and here's how long each thing will take. Here's our team, and we'll just do that. And what that basically ignores is a small thing called how much customers actually care. And I read this story from the Google Docs team where they did one of these exercises. We're like, let's list out all the problems and let's see what we work on. And they did a load of improvements. They made it easier to do page formatting and all this sort of shit. And still customers weren't adopting it. And they're like, what the hell is going wrong? So they tried a different approach. They brought in 100 users and they basically said, here's everything we need to work on. Here's some fake dollars. And we want you to put fake dollars into the cups of the features that you want us to work on. And a really interesting thing happened. All of the money went on to formatting bold, italic, and underline, which is basically how most people still today don't use like heading features in Microsoft Word, and nor do they certainly don't use them in Google Docs. And so all of the money went there. The best part was one of their target customers went into their own wallet and took out another 100 and put that in there as well, right? Because what they didn't realize was this thing, right? Just because it's on a list, it doesn't mean all lists are equal, right? People can care disproportionately more about one thing, and that's okay. And if they do that, that's the thing you should tackle. It's very, very easy to lose priority in an ordered list. And just be mindful of that anytime you're putting a list of things out there. Make just number 2 and number 1 could be light years apart. When you're shipping new features, which as we said, shouldn't be the default every week because you're just going to grow a massive product that you don't necessarily want, you need to think about how you market them. Most features actually flop, right? Most new features flop, including all yours, including all of ours, unless you take a real extra effort to make sure and communicate what the value is. My favorite example of this comes from Microsoft, where they saw fit to boast about something. Microsoft noted that it turns out everything that our users are asking for in the next version of Office, we already have in the current version of Office. So they put out this press release as if to be like, well done us, congratulating the fact that they had basically created a monstrosity of a product where everyone was asking for stuff that was already there. But what's going on there? Well, what's going on is kind of straightforward. They're rolling these things out, but they're not doing anything to try and get people to use them. They're not, like, for example, some standard things. They're not selling what the feature does. Instead, they're selling what it's composed of. They're like, and this ground-up rewrite lets us take the following things, rather than you can now achieve X for your business. it's selling the capability that your product provides is way more impactful than selling the ingredients it's composed of. When you announce a new feature, you always have to follow up in context and get people using it. You have to fight really hard for usage here. So that includes things like, if it's there in the product, there's a right way to pitch it. Call it out and be like, here's the new thing we added. It's awesome. It's going to let you do X or whatever, okay? The alternative here is like, sending a badly targeted message to everyone about something that they haven't seen. Announce it in context is way more important. Probably the biggest crime here that we all commit is we push a huge amount of effort into telling, like, we blog post, customer email, everything, saying, here's our new thing. And that works for all of our current users. But then a whole new set of users go and sign up, and they didn't read that blog post, and they didn't get that email. So now they don't know it's there. So it's buried somewhere. And the only way you would ever found it is if you happen to be around on launch day, which is a shit way to be, right? And then lastly, you have to be like fastidious or passionate about just chasing down feedback. So if people aren't using your product, you need to find out why. If people aren't using a feature, you need to find out why. And you need to be following up. If somebody used it 3 times and never again, you're like, hey, just FYI, we're going to be working on this soon. And I noticed you tried it out, but like you didn't get, it didn't stick. What happened? What went wrong? What does it not do? You need to get this feedback consistently back into your roadmap. It's the easiest thing in the world to do is move on to the next feature. But it's like the worst thing you can do. And I would say like that at different points in your sort of company, your roadmap and priorities will shift. When in the early days, you're talking about doing new features. Once you have new features out there, you're talking about adoption. Once you have adoption, you're talking about improvement. This is how you curate a roadmap. And it took us a long while to get to this sort of style of working, but it serves us really, really well. Intercom is a lot of software. And to basically manage to consistently work on each piece, it takes a lot of discipline. The last lesson that I found incredibly valuable in the past few years has been this idea of consistently resetting your opinions. It's true that startups move ridiculously fast, even if you're deliberately telling the world we're going to take this slow and we're going to take 3 years, whatever. The speed of decisions and the speed of like progress is still quite high in comparison with, say, like a coffee shop or some other type of business. And every decision is you going down a certain path, right? So when you look at, say, like the history of any of your companies, this could be Intercom. We made some decisions early on. Every day we make more and more decisions. Will we do this? Will we do that? Should we hire this person? Should we grow this department? The reality is, like, when people tell you the story of their company, they tell you the path they took, but they don't tell you all the decisions that they made. So you get given this kind of linear sort of story, and it's often presented like a linear story too. People tell you it was A to Z, like it was, if you look at, say, a movie like The Social Network, it was like, well, he had a fight with his girlfriend, so he set up Facebook, and now he's a billionaire, But similarly, like, if you like talk to like even like modern companies that we all look up to and admire, what they'll give you is they're not going to say, that genius moment we had, that was actually a coin toss. We were actually going to do something else. Like people want to present this idea of like it being a fait accompli. Like it was like, of course we were always going to succeed. We're magical. And because and the other knock-on effect of this is that because when we rehash our stories, we tend to think they're this like linear, guaranteed path of progress. We tend to think the future will look like that too. So we kind of plan out the next set of roadmaps. I go, of course we're going to launch to-do features. And then once we launch them, we're never going to need to revisit them because we're going to get it right straight away. And then we're going to move on to the next feature. So it can really bias you, this idea of forgetting about like the things, the decisions you made along the way. Because some of those decisions weren't necessarily correct. And probably the ugliest chart you'll see of the entire MicroConf is this one. But the point being, you're getting smarter about your business every single time you move on. You're getting smarter and smarter and smarter. You know a lot more today than you did 2 years ago when you started along your path. And some of those decisions you made way back, they're not the right decision anymore. When you get new information, you can change your opinion. It's okay. There's a weird thing where people are like, oh, well, 3 years ago, Des, you said the blah. And I'm like, yeah, 3 years ago I did say that. I thought that was true then. I think this is true now. There's a weird pressure that you're under to present yourself as this like permanent cast in stone person, but changing your opinion is a really valuable thing. If you knew then what you know now, would you still have built that feature? Would you still have shipped that integration or chose that architecture? Designed that screen that way, hired that person, opened that office? You can keep going on these things, right? But the reason I can encourage people to reset their opinion a lot is because the mistakes you know about today but are not busy correcting, they're the ones you're making every single day. You're just remaking those mistakes over and over again. And that's as true in your business as it is in your product, as it is in your roadmap, as it is in your life.
You were saying in the beginning of your talk that during your beta, you shouldn't necessarily be listening to which features the users find important because they'll just tell you, to be nice or whatever. But then later in the talk, you were saying that we should, let the users prioritize which features they want. So how do you, when does that switch happen where it does make sense to do that?
So the difference with a beta period is you're working through a speculative idea. So what I said was specifically, people who sign up, if they come from a wide variety of backgrounds and they're trying to use your product for a wide variety of things, it's a real dangerous place to be to let that drive your roadmap. It's a much better place to be to let people who are using your product the way you intended it to be used and using features the way you intended it to be used, to take their input on where you need to improve features. It's kind of like this. The latter is grounded in reality, and the former is grounded in sort of hypotheticals. But I think, in general, I've often said to people, if you want to know how to improve your calendar, talk to people who are using your calendar every day. Don't talk to people who've never necessarily used your calendar at all, or people who don't even know that you have a calendar, and ask them what you need to work on. It's always the pressure is always grounded in reality, and reality usually looks like usage. The alternative is when you're talking to people who, say, won't adopt a feature. First of all, be sure that they're actually getting this job done elsewhere before you listen to their feedback. Because if they're not doing it at all, let's say you have a payroll system and you're trying to work out why they won't do it. Well, maybe they're just not doing payroll at all. But you need to find out, hey, before I ask you about R1, I need to work out what you're currently doing. So at the very least, you're grounding yourself in the fact that they do have this problem and they are solving it through some other means. Then it's a better conversation to have, why not ours? So for me, the whole thing is just grounded in reality, grounded in usage, grounded in real world problems that are actually being solved today.
Can you talk a little bit about changing plans and pricing as your product evolves and managing user expectations?
Yeah. So I think there's a whole talk you could give on pricing, but I believe that when there's a few core beliefs that I have about pricing that I would encourage people to consider. One of them is your product will get better over time. And better is best defined as more valuable. So I do believe you should reconsider your pricing, just like, as I said at the end, you should reconsider absolutely everything about your product and your system. If you find yourself moving up market, what you'll find is, and by upmarket I mean, let's say, attracting larger customers or attracting customers who expect more of you in terms of availability, service, elongated sales processes, any of that sort of stuff. You definitely need to have a way to capture more value. Probably the most broken thing that this industry can tend to do is offer unlimited, uncapped, say, enterprise plans, which is basically giving the biggest discount you can to the richest customers you can, which I think is totally broken. So there's a few different things. One, I think you should, whatever way you consider your pricing, you should absolutely plan on changing your pricing. It should not be set in stone. Now we can talk about grandfathering and migration and all that sort of stuff, but ground zero for me is you need to plan that your pricing will change. You don't know everything when you've set out your first set of pricing. You literally don't know how the product will be adopted or used or utilized or the value it will deliver. So you need to plan on changing it, and that there's implications there in terms of how you actually say integrate it or what sort of pitches you make. You should definitely charge more than you probably think you should. I find that consistently true. And plenty of people have said this before, and some of the people in this room have given much better versions of that pitch than I have. But I think we are creating software that is being used by businesses around the world. Businesses will spend routinely, $100 on taxis in a week. They'll spend $85 on like coconut water, and you're coming in looking for $19 a month for how they like manage their roadmap. It's like, I think there's a real weird discordant thing where people believe that going cheap will get better adoption. I've never seen that to be true whatsoever. I think that there's the best way, like, so one of the things we learned with Intercom was like, when we started, we had one sort of monolithic, you could buy Intercom. And that was actually quite prohibitive for a lot of our customers because they didn't want to use everything. They wanted to use specific flows. And yet we found ourselves trying to capture all the value we had built for people who only wanted to use a sliver of the value. So we made it possible for people to buy specific things, so they could just buy our support product or buy our acquire product, or whatever. And that was really impactful for a very simple reason. More people were able to acquire to adopt our solution, because we didn't feel the pressure of being like, we're displacing MailChimp and Zendesk and like Olark and all these tools. Our price should be somewhat similar to all of those things together. When we got out of that mindset and got into a mindset of let's let people buy what the piece of the product they want to buy, that was a healthier place for both us and our customers. The generalizable principle there for me is like, make sure you're not trying to capture value that your customers don't experience, but make sure you capture the value that all your customers experience. And like there's lots more I could say about that. Like at Intercom, we ended up building our own pricing engine, our own billing solution. Reason for that was like, I believe that if your product is unique in the world, it's a genuine, you should not just simply think, our product, on one hand, your marketing is telling the world we have a whole new solution to the blah problem, but then in the other world, you're saying, but when we go to market, we're going to go gold, silver, bronze, or like small, medium, large, or whatever. We're going to adopt the same pricing model that the entire industry has. I don't think that's necessarily smart either. I think you should consider things like metered billing. You should consider things like, different types of products, or different routes to adopt one piece of your product or whatever. All of those things are worth considering up front, especially in a business, especially if you're bootstrapped, where revenue is actually how it's core. It's one thing if you have millions of dollars in funding, you can actually afford to fuss around and delay these challenges for a while. But like if you're looking for revenue up front, you need to have good ways to capture it. So I mean, I could go on and on and on about this, but does that kind of address? Yeah, cool.
Rob has a question first,
Sure.
and then we have another one over here.
Sorry.
Check. All right. I have a question for you. You mentioned that it's a common mistake for folks to launch a feature and then just do a simple email, and then anyone who signs up after that never gets that, right?
Yeah.
So obviously that's a mistake. Is there a tactic or something that you guys have done at Intercom to kind of introduce, people who sign up after that to your features?
Yeah, sure. So I think every time you add, there's a checklist that we kind of go through after we add a feature to the product. And it includes all the boring shit, like is it explained in the docs? Is it on the marketing side? All that sort of stuff. Have we reached out to all previous customers who asked for this and let them know we now have it? Obviously, that sort of checklist is useful, but then part of that checklist is how core is this feature to somebody experiencing the delight of Intercom? So a random example, we recently shipped a Facebook integration. That means we can integrate with your Facebook page and pull in anytime any messages is there and add that to the support inbox. It's a kind of question for us is how much we want to pitch that. But because of where it's located, it's in like settings, integrations, and then types of integrations, and then Facebook. No one's going to stumble into it, right? So the decision we make is, how do we decide at what point to pitch this? And how is it more important than, say, making sure people send an auto message or like upload an email template, right? There's a lot of things you kind of have an idea of what you want customers to do. So we basically have a sort of, type of framework where we work out we call them P numbers in Intercom. Like P0 is like everyone needs to know about this forevermore, and that would be like, say, a new route to sign up or a new super feature. And like P3 will be like, we have this, but people they're going to go looking. So like maybe like a Salesforce integration is like P3. But the tactic specifically is like when you know how important it is versus other things you want people to do, you should have a plan that says, oh, okay, like, is this something people need to adopt in their first week, month, whatever? And then you sort of have a sense of a time horizon of when is this important, and then you basically have a message that pitches what the capability that they're going to enable is. So again, not selling like we have a Facebook integration, but selling like keep all your Facebook messages alongside your user messages and keep it all in sync. Then it's just a case of like where does this lie in our priority system versus other stuff that we want people who have yet to adopt this feature to know about. And it goes into like one of our campaigns, which is a yet to be released feature, but you'll see a bit. And it'll just get like, they'll get an in-app message if they're in the product. They'll get an email if they have gone a specifically long period of time without still adopting it or whatever. But like the criteria for who gets this is people who we credibly believe can get value from this, and people who, that's basically number one. It's like, who do we think should be using this that isn't, and how long is an acceptable wait time versus all the other messages we want to send to say, oh, and by the way, you should add Facebook. And then the last piece is when you have that message live, you have to look at the success rate of that message. So we know, for example, with the Facebook thing, like because it's a free add-on, I think it's like 75% of people who get that message will go ahead and do the Facebook connection if they have a Facebook page. And then for the other 25%, we want to work out what the hell we got wrong. Like what would have made this easier? Why aren't they using it? What else are they using instead? All that sort of stuff. So that's kind of the full run through. It's a bit tactical, but you kind of get the idea.
And we have time for one more question over here. Dave?
Hi, on the question of onboarding, I'm curious if you have any thoughts or lessons around re-onboarding, maybe dormant users or dormant customers, people that you're looking to re-engage. Who does that in your company, or do you have any special nuances or techniques around that?
For sure. A few random thoughts on this is it's a hard tactic. People who know what your product does and use your product and then quit your product, it's that's a much worse position to be in with a customer than somebody who's never heard of your product, right? You have to kind of reignite a lot. So what we typically do, so we used to like try and do manual reach outs, and I think genuinely in the earlier days when when our customer numbers were in the hundreds or whatever, we would reach out to people who had quit and work out what went wrong. And like, I'd say like maybe like 5% of the time we'd get them back, but the other 95% we'd get learnings. And learnings is really what the bigger value, in my opinion, of these two things. However, today, when we roll out substantial new, like as I said earlier, like P1 or P0 type stuff, we will take that opportunity to mail the larger group who've yet to unsubscribe, if you like, and say, here's a few more capabilities we have now. Maybe this now is at a tipping point where you can come back to us. But like obviously when someone quits as well, it's important to know the context or the reason why they quit. So if they quit because we didn't have an email templates feature, yeah, we'll follow up when we have that feature. But if they quit because their business failed, there's no point in following up and being like, hey, well, we now have email. Sorry about your business, but we can now do email templates. So like, so it's a. So I guess the generalizable lessons here is like understand, and like we do this in Intercom, we record cancellation reasons on the user record. So understand why somebody quit or didn't use your product at all. That's one whole piece. And then the second piece is like, when you're following up, make sure you have something new to say, because you're actually trying to encourage a whole new set of fresh eyes. And you won't get that for something tiny. So you're better off doing when you're something big or a new offering for them that will actually trigger a refresh on their side.